right, well, let's continue now with tonight's top story, Trump humiliating Kevin Rudd on the world stage. Now, I spoke with New York Post columnist Miranda Devine about all of this a little earlier. Miranda Devine, terrific to see you again as always. The big news, of course, is President Trump's meeting with Albanese today, and the major news story to come out of it is Trump putting Rudd firmly in his place.
Well, I thought it was fantastic that Andrew Clennell from Sky News asked such a brilliant question. And he was standing right behind Kevin Rudd when he asked Donald Trump, what do you think of the ambassador to Australia who has been so rude about you in the past? And much to, I'm sure, Kevin Rudd's chagrin, Trump, first of all, said he knew nothing about Kevin Rudd, which would be such a blow to his ego. And then he said, well, I don't like you. and you know, Kevin Rudd's face was crestfallen is the definition of his face. So apparently after the media left, Kevin Rudd apologised profusely to Donald Trump for having dissed him before he became president. But if anyone who knows Donald Trump saw that, they would know that that would be absolutely the worst thing you could do. I don't know what Donald Trump's reaction was to Kevin Rudd's, you know, abject apology, but just knowing the man, I know that he doesn't like that. Kevin Rudd should have owned it, and but he didn't. He was a little bit pathetic about it. To saying that, though, Kevin Rudd has worked assiduously to curry favour with various members of the Trump administration, like Kevin Hassett, who is his next-door neighbour in Washington, D.C., and Kevin Hassett likes Kevin Rudd very much because Kevin has just been a good neighbour to him. And so Kevin Hassett's an important member of the economic team at the White House. And so that's really stood Rudd in good stead, despite his baggage from being such a never-Trumper. And I have to say, Anthony Albanese, you know, I'm not a huge fan of their policies, but he did a very good job today. He schmoozed President Trump, and the minerals deal is the best thing that Australia could do.
Miranda, many Australians who have been appalled by Albanese's prime ministership may have been hoping that the president would give him some home truths, as he has done with other world leaders. He didn't do that. Is it your sense that Trump has an understanding of what's been going on in Australia?
I think so. And in fact, President Trump has said to me on a couple of occasions, what's gone wrong with Australia? What happened to Australia? Because the perception, particularly among conservatives in America, is that Australia they used to look at as like America in the olden days, like America before America went woke, and that Australia is where men are men and, you know, sheep are scared sort of thing. It's this old school idea that Australia was resilient and proud. And I do feel every time I go back to America, to Australia, which I do every year, I do feel that the country's changed significantly. And that's what Trump and other people in the MAGA movement in America are picking up on. And so I was sort of surprised because I know there is a lot of negativity with Trump and the cabinet about Australia's turn to the woke. But also, I've been told by Trump's team that they quite like doing trade deals with left-wing governments. They specifically said this to me, and I said, why? And they said, because they are quite willing to throw their agriculture industry, to throw their farmers under the bus. And so, you know, that's kind of what's happened in Australia with American beef. Americans were very happy about American beef going into Australia, but I know from talking to American farmers, they don't like imported beef. They don't want foot and mouth disease in their country. So I think that's where you've got Labor doesn't care two hoots about Australian farmers. And so I think Trump is looking at this minerals deal as being a very, optically anyway, it's a real solution to the China problem. And China is playing hardball when it comes to rare earths. And so I know that Americans are desperate to find an alternative to China and to fix the supply chain. And so Australia, whether it's a mirage or not, Australia's offered that. And I think that was really, for all Albanese's failings, for the fact that he angered President Trump enormously by joining with Canada and the UK and France in this ridiculous Palestinian state issue, which actually costs lives because it delayed the peace deal, and Trump was furious about that. And I think that explains the bone crusher handshake for Macron just recently in Egypt, and also the dissing of Starmer, who, you know, I've talked to Trump since then, Donald Trump, the president, and he says, sort of in this innocent face, oh no, I certainly didn't disrespect him, but it was pretty obvious he was doing it in a sort of ambivalent way when he called Keir Starmer up to the podium. Where's UK? Where's my friend? And then Keir Starmer goes up to the podium in Egypt, and Trump just says, oh, thanks for coming, and turns his back on him. And Starmer sort of had to shuffle back to his place and was very embarrassed.
Just finally, China has yet again acted aggressively towards Australian defence personnel, firing flares dangerously close to our Air Force pilots. Do you think the Albanese government is responding in a strong enough fashion?
No, it's really frightening. Looking at it from the outside, I just see this continually, these buzzing or throwing flares right in the face of Australia's Air Force and Navy. It's an aggression that is so naked and so disrespectful to Australia. And it's part of a pattern of China just bigfooting the entire Indo-Pacific. And Australia is not, you know, a little puny country. It ought to be standing up for itself. Obviously, Scott Morrison misstepped when he tried to do that, and China really brought Australia to heel, and Albanese has sort of come on board and said, oh, we don't want to make China an enemy. It's, I think, a false reality that Australians live in. I go back there and everyone seems very happy. It's a very nice lifestyle, but I think it's a borrowed lifestyle because it's dependent entirely on China. I don't think that that would be possible to maintain the lifestyle that Australians have at the moment if it wasn't being propped up by China and by these ridiculous immigration numbers. And that is a recipe for disaster in the not too distant future. And I'm also told by friends in Australia that people prefer China to America, that people don't like Trump, they don't like America. That's what polls are showing. And again, wake up, Australia.
100%. The attitude is inexplicable. Miranda Devine, thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sharri.